And it just changed for you, Ray?
Well, I switched it to full screen.
Okay, I just launched it, so.
All I got was one small
Just
blip
changed
of
for you,
our
Ray?
screen, and then it went back to the sign again. Well, I switched it to full screen.
Okay,
There it is.
I just launched it, so.
All I got was one.
Mute.
Yes.
So Mandy, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
I have 6 o'clock.
And we have a quorum, so we can get started.
Great. Welcome back, everybody, to the second budget meeting via Zoom. I have the statement to read about our Zoom meeting again before we actually begin. So this meeting is being held through Zoom video conference and is being recorded. Presenters and members of the public will be unmuted and the video feature will be turned on during your scheduled presentation. The meeting is also being streamed live on the city website. The chat function will be disabled during most of the meeting. We ask that all participants be respectful and remember that anything written in the chat will be part of the permanent meeting record. If this meeting is disrupted, we will mute and remove people as needed. I will call a 5-minute recess. All video and sound will be shut off. If we are unable to continue, the meeting will be closed. Budget committee members will receive an email from Sammy with direction on how to join a closed teleconference meeting. Budget committee will then set a new date for a new meeting to continue the business and adjourn. Okay, I call the meeting of the URA budget to order at 6:01 p.m. Sammy, will you do roll call?
Yes, Todd Waters, Sharon Taylor, Jeff Malam, Linda Krager, Terry Dawson, Paul Thompson, Patricia McConnell, John Lehman, Kyle Blaine, and Nancy Bell are all present. John Fox. Don't see him. He will be joining us. And Marcus Alexander is absent. There is a quorum.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. My Zoom was acting up. Ann, I would ask if there are any addition, changes, or deletions to the agenda.
No, ma'am.
Okay, and Sammy, are there any, is there any public comment tonight?
We received no written public comment and there's nobody at City Hall. No.
Okay, thank you. So Ann, can I ask you then to review the budget document?
Absolutely. Evening, everybody. The URA budget is a pretty simple budget. It really at this time has one purpose, and that is to collect tax revenues, and those revenues are utilized to transfer to the city to cover sewer debt. I want to call attention to my budget message because I did make a mistake in that message, and I apologize for that. In the second paragraph in my message, I say the limitation of the contribution to the sewer fund was set at approximately 13 million. And that is incorrect. That was I don't know why I put that amount in there. It is 9 million. It has been 9 million. It has not changed. And the 9 million is very consistent with our financial document that we've been working with since I came on to the city, as well as our new financial analysis for utility that we are just now completing. So I just wanted to call attention to that. And again, I'm very sorry. The budget is pretty simple. It basically reports the taxes and interest income, which together equal 417,000. We have very limited expenditures on this, with the exception of the transfer to the city. There's $8,000 in administrative costs, so that's a total of $408,025. The total expenditure budget is or appropriation is $452,000, which balances with the revenues when combined with the beginning fund balance. The revenues that's expected from tax receipts are down a little bit. They had a really great year in 19, in which there was a 7% increase in revenues. And when we met with the county, they said that we could probably predict a similar year. While that happened with the city somewhat, it did not happen with the URA. But still, they were still saying that from whatever we collected this year, we should anticipate a 3% growth. However, with COVID-19, that was prior to COVID-19. So we are actually reducing the anticipated taxes just because we don't know what to expect, but also that we know that we won't collect what we thought we would last year. The transfer to the city has been reduced to 400,000 from 480 from last year. The only reason we were at 480 last year is because there was quite a bit of money there, and the committee had decided that we should really transfer as much as possible, leaving somewhere in the range of 50,000 for administrative costs. So we have an ending fund balance of 43,975. So that is the total budget for the URA, and I'm happy to answer any questions that somebody might have. Councilor Lehman, you need your sound on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
So I understand errors and mistakes can be made. How did that one happen that it was reported so differently?
That was just my mistake. I just put it in there, and I know it's 9 million because I've been asked this question a million times. And I just, when I was typing it out, I didn't catch my error.
Okay, so just a transposition or just putting in a wrong number?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Believe me, I have pushed these sewer numbers enough to know that that should be 9 million.
Okay, thank you.
Sharon?
We've had, an email or two back and forth. You probably haven't had time to really look at it yet, but have you been able to determine if there is a duration for the Urban Renewal Agency? From what I saw in the plan, it was only through 23, 24.
Well, that's true, but it's or $9 million. And so,
Whichever comes first.
Right. And so I suspect that I So when I'm looking at it, I see it that that's going to come about in 31 or 32, that we hit the $9 million.
But I think I read it to say it's whichever comes first, the date or the dollars. So anyway, it's something to look at and determine because, you know, that makes a big difference budget wise.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you.
Okay, if there aren't any more questions, I would entertain a motion to recommend the 2021 URA budget to the city council.
Seconded.
Todd, was that you?
Yes.
I'll second Todd's motion.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
You're welcome,
Sure.
Todd.
Okay, Sammy, then shall we take a vote on the motion? Do you want hands raised for in
Yeah,
favor?
so we will do all of those in favor. Will you raise your hands, please?
Make sure your hand's in the screen.
Thank you.
Okay.
All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, and so then I'm going to call Jeff Milam for his vote
Yes.
and Paul Thompson, please.
Well, you can't see my hand raised? I'm only 6 blocks away.
Right? Okay, great. The motion passed. Oh, excuse me. Does anybody abstain? The motion passes.
Great, thank you. One other item of business, and that is our minutes from the last URA budget meeting last year. And those were sent to you, so hopefully you had a chance to look them over or are quickly looking them over right now. I did not see anything that needed a correction, but if anyone does, can you raise your hand? Otherwise, I will also entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the May 21st, 2019 URA budget meeting.
Linda, so moved.
Thank you. And a
Second.
Who is the second?
Paul.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Okay, so again, we will vote, and any last minute thoughts on that? Okay, so we will vote again. So Sammy, I'm assuming all in favor, hands in the screen.
Yes. Thank you. All those opposed? Excuse me, Jeff Milam
Yes.
and Paul Thompson.
Yes.
Any abstain? The motion passes.
Okay, thank you. With that, I will adjourn the URA meeting at 6:12 p.m. And give me a second to switch here. Okay, and also at 6:12, I will call the City of Coburg budget meeting to order. And Sammy, can you take roll, please?
I can. So we have Nancy Bell, Kyle Blaine. John Fox has not joined us yet. John Lehman. Marcus Alexander is not present. Patricia McConnell, Paul Thompson, Terry Dawson, Linda Krager, Jeff Milam, Sharon Taylor, and Todd Waters are present. There is a quorum.
Thank you, Sammy. And Sammy and Ann, can I ask if there are any additions, changes, or deletions to the agenda?
I believe the one agenda item is that we do not have the minutes from last week available for you to approve. Those are not ready yet.
Okay, thank you. And Sammy, do we have any public comment tonight?
There's nobody signed up for public comment.
Thank you. So first on the docket is to open up the public hearing for resolution 2020-11, a resolution declaring the city's election to receive state revenues. And I open that at 6:14 p.m. Ann, is there a staff report?
I did.
And you're muted.
Right.
There we go. I did send along the staff report that I actually would provide to the city council for this to give some background. This is really an annual step that we go through in which the city certifies that they wish to receive state-funded revenues, and also that we qualify to receive them. This is approximately I'm looking for my report and it's got buried on my desk, but about $17,000. So we have certain services that we provide to the community, and so this allows us to certify that we do provide those services, and that is what we're assuring. We do discuss what we do with the funds. These funds are in the general fund, and they help to support those services that we provide to the community.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Ray.
I have a question regarding, it looks like this one doesn't state what, there's like 5 criteria that you have to meet 4 of.
Right.
In previous iterations of this, we've listed those. I don't see those listed on this. Should we be doing that?
There's 2 different resolutions. One is that the city council assures that we provide those services. This one says that we certify that we held a hearing before the budget committee. And so it's 2 separate things, and we have to do them both before city council, but only one before the budget committee.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Where do I find that document?
It was in your email that was sent out with the agenda.
Okay, then I've got it.
Yeah.
I'll find it.
Yes, John. You'll have to unmute.
What's the title of the document?
It's state shared, it's a resolution.
Okay, that's enough.
State shared revenues. It should have been sent out with your agenda. Or with your, I'm sorry, with the changes or the agendas that Sammy set out in your invitation to this meeting.
I think it was documents on Friday, wasn't it?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Any other questions? And Sammy, can I ask if there was any written public input, public testimony?
There is no written testimony and there's nobody signed up to speak.
Okay, thank you. Then if there are no other questions, I will close this hearing at 6:18 p.m. Next would be a review of the additional budget documents we received. And Ann, will you do that, please?
Absolutely. So I hope that you all received an email last week. I tried to get it out as fast as possible with the changes that would be made in the budget. So the first one is a decrease in the transfer from the URA to the sewer, as we had set that at 450. After I did the URA budget, I decided it really needed to be 400. So there's that change in it. I moved City Hall interest from materials and service to debt. And I removed a kiosk project. We got more information on that project, and it doesn't look like the city will have to manage that project nor run the funds for it through the city. So we can remove that project and the expenses of that project. We also updated let's see, and that was really all, that was for the 2021. The biggest piece that I really wanted to discuss tonight is I did send out an email saying that, you know, after the discussion of the ending fund balance going down over the years, that has always been a concern of mine, and I always keep a good eye on the ending fund balance of the city. A couple of years ago, I really recommended that we, you know, look at a $250,000 reserve in the general fund. And then our auditors asked us to please put that in contingency rather in reserve each year. But on top of that, there's our ending fund balance. And I gave that some thought, and I really comfortably, as budget officers, I'd like to see that remain around $300,000 every year. And the purpose of that it's comfortable for me is that the general fund is really the fund in the city that can make a difference when there is an emergency in any fund. That is the only fund that we could go help the street fund if it got in a bind temporarily, or the water fund. And it's also the fund that makes the city nimble. So we can make things happen, such as the $50,000 resolution to help with our businesses and individuals that have been struggling due to COVID-19. So those kind of things, when we don't have a balance or a contingency in place, those are the kind of things that we don't have the ability to maneuver. And I think that the maneuverability of the general fund is very important. And that's why I've made the recommendation that we do try to remain at that $300,000 mark with the $250,000 reserve or contingency each year. So I did talk with the staff. I talked with the mayor and the council president, and we were able to find funds in future years to reduce. And so we did get across the board all the way 5 years out to an ending fund balance of $300,000 or more. And with that, I'm very comfortable with the budget as written. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have regarding that. Councilor Lehman?
So is that 300,000 ending fund balance, contingency, or reserve?
It's ending fund balance. So contingency would remain at 250,000 always, and ending fund balance would be at 300.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions? Sharon?
I just wanted to say thank you for doing that, because, you know, I was one of the ones that expressed some concern about having that balance drop and continuing to drop over the 5-year period. So I appreciate the work that was done for that.
Thank you. Mayor?
Well, I want to say thank you to Sharon for being meticulous and really following up on these things, especially the trending. And I know Ann picked this up in the middle of the budget season with us losing our previous budget officer, finance officer. No excuse, but this is why we like to have other people looking at this budget and working through it to point out some things so that we get the good input and we have a good budget. So thank you, Sharon. And I think Ann and the staff worked really quickly and showed how dynamic we can be to get through these issues. So thanks again.
Anne,
Yeah.
other than the kiosk, what were the things, and I apologize, I just am not, I can't see them real well. I have my computer open, but what are the what are the other projects that were delayed?
The main project that we delayed was the $50,000 police car. And the chief and I talked about that, and he has been really successful at getting cars for a less expensive price. And he said he could do his best to try to do that again. His officer is obviously extremely important to him. And so that was something that we could offer up and continue to look at, because we all know he needs a good fleet, but in $50,000 in 1 year, we can wait and see how we do over the next few years and just make sure that we can keep that line at $300,000 and try to find it in other places.
How about the street, I'm sorry, how about the street projects that we're doing? Any cuts there?
You know, that's all going to be dependent on what we collect. We did budget for them, but we can't, until we can know what we're going to collect from gas tax and things like that, we're going to have to just kind of, unless it's a granted project, which we do have one from the SCA, we're going to have to just kind of wait till the fall and see how this all pans out. And then we can look at street projects. So the street budget is really just a budget it's the best projection we have for how we can move forward if we actually end up with some funds. So Councilor Lehman, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? A couple, 3 meetings ago, Mayor was surprised to realize that we had like $1.5+ million in street fund projects. And then you explain that. Are those funds still there? And is it just a placeholder if the revenues come in, or is there actually funds in our budget for those projects?
So we have some STC funds. We don't have that much, but we do have some. So no, we don't have enough to do $1 million. I think what we were talking about was grant opportunities that we were hoping for them to happen. We have got a good indication that we have a good chance of getting some good ones over the next couple years. That could be upwards of that amount, but we're still waiting to see for sure. So at this time, all we can do is what we have available is the street taxes, state street taxes, and then what we collect in SDCs for roads or capital projects that change the ability to use the street. So if you're adding in some sidewalks or wheelchair ramps onto the street or any kind of area that people have better access to the streets, and sometimes SDC funds can be used for just repairing streets, they can't. So that's what we have available to us unless we are able to get grant funds, or that we are able to put a transportation utility fee in place.
Thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions?
So there were a couple other items that were sent out. I think we mentioned the resolution document and then applications for Terry Dawson and Jeff Milam, which we'll go through later.
So if I don't have any more questions, I could just state really quickly that the final budget would be, and I did send out a new sheet that looks like this. And with a comparison at the bottoms on either side. So the final budget would be $11,936,715 for the whole city. John? You're muted.
And that's just general fund, is that correct?
That's the whole city. So the total requirements for the general fund would be $3,343,466. Street fund would be $1,254,312. The water fund would be $3,459,251. And the sewer fund is $3,879,686 for a total of $11,936,715. That's a 5% difference from $12,585,169 last year. Yes, sir.
So does that also include grant funds as well?
Yes. Sharon?
Just a clarification, because I know in cities, sometimes you state it differently than we do in regular accounting. It says total revenues 11,000,009, but really our revenues are only 6,000,003, correct?
That's correct. That includes the beginning fund balance.
Right, okay. So just clarifying that. And so when you say requirements, that's what? How would you describe that?
The requirements are the expenses, the allocations out or the transfers out, contingencies, and ending fund balance.
Okay, so again, it's a combination of expenses, contingent. Okay, so it's yeah.
That's how we're required to report the total, the total of the ending or the
Right.
expenses are
Like I said, yeah, it's a little different than corporate accounting. That's why I was wondering. But yeah, just the phrase total revenues of 12 million. No, we really don't have that in terms of revenues. But yeah, okay, thanks.
Mayor?
Does that also include the potential grants so that if we get them, we're able to spend?
So it does include grants like the SCA grant. We moved that forward a year. And so any grants that we know we have, I don't think we have budgeted the regional grants. And even if we get those, they're going to be in future years anyway. We're not going to see them in 21.
Okay.
So we would budget that for future years. Any further questions? All right.
Okay, we do have old business, and that was follow-up to questions from May 19th meeting.
I didn't have any question. I had questions from Sharon only regarding the URA, and nobody emailed me questions. With the exception of Linda, you emailed a few questions regarding the officer.
Yes.
And clarifications on the officer. And I believe Chief is here. I forward those to Chief. And
Right, he has put those in the budget documents.
okay,
I'm sorry, what was that? You want him on the record? Is that what you said? The email?
the email from Linda,
No,
I'm sorry, what did she say last? I missed it.
she said that Larry has put them in the budget document.
yes, they were not questions from last week, I don't think. They were questions from when we were planning the meeting.
Okay, yes,
As I looked over the materials.
and he provided those in his presentation. Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood that.
Okay, so we don't have any follow-up questions then.
No, I did not receive any.
Okay, great. Well then with that, I guess I will open it to general discussion on the budget. So no questions or clarifications needed? Well, because you know what comes next, then I'll entertain a motion for the, that we recommend the 2021 budget to the city council.
So moved, Linda.
Well, hold
It
on.
looked like
Sharon.
Sharon beat me.
I'll second it.
Oh, okay, great. All right, so it's been moved and seconded that we recommend this budget to the city council. Before we vote, is there any discussion? Okay, so Sammy, do you want to do the voting? Shall we do the in favor hand thing?
Yeah, let's do it. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. See none. Paul Thompson.
Yes. And can you hear that?
Yes, thank you. Jeff Blum.
Yes.
Thank you. Any abstain? The motion passes.
Great. Well, thank you. So generally, before we finish up our other business, we like to take a moment to talk about the budget process and see if there is anything that we would like to have done differently next year. And we did have some suggestions from the last meeting, so I'll repeat those. One is that the department directors tie their major projects to the council goals. The other was to list out the top 10 increases and reductions in the budget, just to highlight those. And then another one, which I didn't say anything last time, but I would appreciate too, and that's an acronym key. I had to ask what the TUF was there initially. So those three have already been suggested, but do we have other thoughts for next year's budget?
In person.
Yeah. No pandemic, please.
I hope so. It works, but it's kind of odd.
I do have a discussion point. Brian has most of the projects, most of the money, and most of the time. How does the budget committee feel about Brian's presentation? We seem to have him always in a crunch time when he gets cut short. Is that just my perception, or does the committee have input on how we're doing with the input from the directors, especially Brian, which to me seems he's always kind of getting chopped because we're running out of time. Sharon.
I felt he seemed to have sufficient time and answered any questions that we have. And so I appreciated his presentation.
Okay, Councillor Lehman? You're
Muted,
again.
John.
I would just like to see a little bit more discussion or explanation when there's ask for, additional officer or for a building for public works or an additional patrol car. And what I hear often is, we're letting you know now that there's a need and we'll address it in the future in next year's budget or the following year budget. I just like a little bit more specificity about where, and you, for example, put that in your list of priorities, a year in advance for when you're going to be perhaps presenting it, or some discussion about the trade-offs that would have to occur for those things to occur. A reduction in our ending fund balance or contingency or reserves, or whether there's the expectation that the revenues will come in to meet that need or something. It's nice to hear that these are things that we need and we're looking at them on the horizon, but it would also be interesting to have a little bit more meat to the bones on how realistic it is, how doable is it, can we move on it more quickly, or is it kind of a wait and see kind of situation as to whether it will happen or needs to happen.
So I'd like to address it first and then give the staff opportunity. But what I see is when we're doing the 5-year budget projection, well, that's a table that you have to put numbers into. And we don't really have numbers yet. We just know that it's a thought, it's an idea that's out there. And the staff really needs to spend some time looking at this, and there, all those questions that you were asking is the questions that need to be answered. And so to put it before the budget committee with our 5-year projection, it requires a number to be put into a box, and we haven't answered the questions enough to be able to put that in there. So I think it's a good discussion that Brian says we need this, or the chief says we're going to need this down the road, but I don't have enough information to put a number in the box right now. And this is, believe me, I think there's going to be some pretty serious discussion next year, so that hopefully when we have the budget committee next year, we do have a potential number and a process to look at whether we can, do that with revenues and the requirements that we have. So that's part of the problem, John, is that there's just so many unanswered questions right now. We really couldn't put it into the official place in the document for a 5-year plan to say we need a building or we need this. So that just for that one specific item anyway, and it's definitely going to be something that we're going to look into. And there's a lot of things going on with the water master plan that will affect that. And we have to wait to see how that water master plan projects, the well, the tank up on the hill, and the I-5 bore, to see that will help us to answer some of those questions.
Thank you.
I'd like to just offer us from a staff level too, and share with you how we go about the budget process. And this year has been clunky, and I'll be the first one to say it's been clunky. I came in halfway into the budget officer, but more than that, our meetings have been clunky. We haven't been able to meet as a staff as we normally do. And so this year was a little bit difficult all around. And I think the staff did an exceptional job of trying to engage in the best way possible. and change the way that we do things and readjust because we felt like we needed to go in another direction or whatever. And I really have to compliment them because they always rise to the occasion. But when we put the budget together, I don't direct the staff at all as to what my priorities are, because my priorities are the city council priorities. So that's why we have that city council retreat. That's why we develop that work plan, because that is the priorities of the city. And then the staff, the directors of those departments take that work plan and those priorities and they set their 5-year budget. And as the mayor said, they may not know how much a car is going to cost in 3 years. All they can do is put in a holding place for them to say, yeah, I think we're going to have to do a car and I think it's going to be about this amount. Or we're going to do a park project and I think it's going to be about this amount and we're going to do it in year 4. And that's how we can look out and start planning for those things. Not just for planning for the spending, but planning for looking for funding. So if we're looking out 5 years and we know we have a park project, that maybe we can look around for funding for it. Or the street projects, we're looking for funding. So I think that it's not my priorities. I'm going with the direction of the city council and their priorities.
And in addition to that, I've worked really hard to get the department heads to have that face-to-face dialogue with our counselors and our budget committee. That was the number one complaint that I heard as a counselor, that we didn't get to talk to the people doing the work and really see what those needs were and where we were going as far as the workers concerned. And as a counselor, that was kind of frustrating because you're making these really important decisions and we had a very narrow inlet of information. So we didn't get to hear from the public works, from the police individually in that budget process. We heard it as a combined staff report, and it was very limiting. So it's taken more time. It is taking more time in the meetings for all of us, but I just think that's so worth it to be able to have that dialogue with these department heads and hear what they're saying and hear the chief about his needs for an officer or a car, and Brian, the needs for an operations center to be able to house our equipment. And those things, I think, give us a better perspective of the 5-year plan, even if we don't have numbers. But it also helps us make a stronger decision as we move forward. And having a look at all these names and pictures on this screen, having all of those involved, I think always makes a stronger decision when we're done. And so that's been my push. And so that's what we're looking for here, is to hear from you as to what may need to change so that we can keep a good process going.
Thank you. John? John, did you have something?
Yeah, so between Sharon Taylor and Councilor Lehman's response, in that, well, my thought is it's not necessarily more screen time or more face time. It's having executive summaries sent to us in advance so it can stimulate our questions and thoughts, so that when we can have efficient meetings and the FaceTime, or if we have to have one-to-ones or like site visits, I'm all into that. When we had tours of different facilities, I think that's great. But I don't necessarily know that it's cutting someone short on screen time. It's having the information in advance in a concise and executive type summary, so that you can winnow through it and articulate questions for the meeting. So I think it's a balance between the two.
And I agree with you, Councillor Fox, because I think this meeting process has showed us that we were able to get that information out in writing and then hopefully just generate the questions from the council and committee members. Terry, I saw you raising your hand.
Yeah, I wanted to address directly your original question, Ray, but it also is comparative to what John just said. In my experience, we had more time for Brian and his predecessors and others when we weren't meeting just twice for budget committee meetings. And I'm not suggesting going back to a 3-meeting format, but when we did not push all of the department heads into one night, and there was the ability for that to spread out a little more, there was additional information that was able to be offered, or inquiries that could be made. I do think we found an acceptable balance, especially if we only want to meet twice during the budget season. But what John says is really perhaps the best place to find additional balance if we don't think we're finding quite enough time with department heads all, reporting on one night, and that's additional documentation. And that might be a little more of a challenge for them. I'm not trying to increase their work either. But all of this is trying to find a happy medium. They used to do less textual reporting and more in-person reporting, but those meetings, used to last 2 weeks and late into each night. And so they're really, this is really better, but there may be additional better ways of getting additional information we hope to have.
Sharon?
I can. Yeah, I appreciated the format this year, having more of the presentations in the book, because it does give you kind of an advanced look at what's going to be presented, and you can start to postulate your questions and think about it in advance. And so, even if we're not Zooming in the future, I still think it's a good idea.
So more of the executive summary, like Councillor Fox was talking about, where we do have more written material. And I think this is kind of it helps the counselors, because we see this twice. They give us the retreat presentation where we do have the face-to-face. And I think that's good because it helps us to set goals. But having the staff having to come back and do basically the same thing with the committee, I think maybe an executive summary would be more helpful to really fine-tune their wording and presentation to the committee. So I kind of like that idea. I do like that idea, not kind of.
So you want to keep the budget message for each department as we did it this year, because that was the first time we've ever done it that way.
I appreciated that. Of course, I'm a visual learner, I think, more. And so, but I did think it helped to have the, the summaries and where we're going with this, so that, we're already into the process when we start to meet.
Great.
Someone else had their hand up, I think.
Looking.
I was just saying, me too, I'm a visual learner. So to take things in and digest it for a little while is helpful for me. And that way, we can balance out all the learning styles and whatnot. And the key was the executive summary rather than a tome, which will lose me. And so you get the key points, and if it raises my eyebrows, I might send an email out in advance.
Okay, thanks. Any other input on improvements? Sharon?
I'm just gonna go because no one else is raising their hand. I don't think you can see me, Linda.
Oh.
It's okay. It's no biggie. There's a lot of windows up. My suggestion is more of a nice to have and less of a need to have. But I think it would be kind of interesting to look at taking the budget highlights that you laid out, Anne, in your 2021 kind of overview, and looking at how we did against those next year. So this time next year, kind of doing a look back on the overall budget recommendations that were in place, the things that we had outlined as being important to us, the things that were, supporting city council goals, and then seeing, kind of quickly how we did. So, over the course of the year, I know for me, I lose touch with what's going on once we leave this meeting. And to a certain extent, I stay informed of what's happening in the city, but it's really difficult sometimes to kind of connect the dots between something that happens, in 4 months from now or, next year, and be able to remember that in this meeting in 2021. And so I don't think that we need to spend a lot of time on it at the beginning in that first meeting of the following year's budget committee meeting. But I think it would be an interesting way to open up in addition to all the other stuff that you guys cover, because I think it would be a good way for us from a budget committee perspective, or at least for me, to kind of realign myself with what it is that we're doing and what we're working towards, as well as just remind myself what it was that we accomplished in the most recent year and that look back. And then kind of have an opportunity to reflect on some of the things that maybe didn't come to fruition, or some of the things that we weren't able to plan or know about, and keep that in mind when we are planning the budget for the following year. So not a huge time allocation, but maybe a slide where we spend 5 to 10 minutes just doing a recap and a look back to get everybody kind of back realigned with what it is that we're doing and what we're working towards, and some of the things that we had accomplished and done.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I think you raised your hand at the bottom, but you were like going sideways in the screen. So are you okay?
I'm totally okay. I just wanted to back up for a second on the budget message. A little bit of clarification for staff. Was the budget message, did it have enough detail in it, or are you folks looking for more details? Are you looking for, how much pipe costs or what fuel projections are going to be, or is the details that we provided this year enough?
Todd?
So for me, I don't personally need that level of detail. I think what I would love to see in that budget message is, what are you asking for and what's the impact on the city? And how does it support city council goals? And if I know those three things, then it's a lot easier for me to be able to put my personal bias aside of what I want to see for the city or where I want the city to go. And it allows me to more objectively look at what you're asking for and why it's important to you and how the city's going to benefit. So I think for me, if I get that, I'm good. I don't necessarily need that level of detail. I think that would bog me down, but that's kind of just where I'm coming from in that regard.
Councilor Lehman? You're muted.
So what I was talking about earlier was, in terms of the detail, is more of the prioritizing of the justifications for the needs. So you have 4 or 5 needs. You have the police officer, you have the police vehicle, you have the operations center, you have a street sweeper, you have all these things that are discussed with us, and they're all important needs. What I like to see is how those are prioritized in terms of the more immediate needs. And I guess this would come from Ann primarily as the city administrator, how she has evaluated those and present to city council to see if we agree with that, or we have more questions about what we feel is the higher priority for this year, next year, or the following year.
Ray?
So the hesitation for me is to have Ann place those priorities for Brian, Mandy, and the chiefs in their different departments. Now, maybe overall as a goal setting with a group, but I think it's so important to hear each of those individually, and then as a department. And then I think it's more of our responsibility as a body to determine how far that would go. Now, Ann and I have talked about, when is that time that the city administrator does step in and start prioritizing these budget items as a request from each of the department heads? I think what I've seen so far is that Ann recognizes the need, like the general trending issue, general fund trending, and takes it to the staff, and the staff looks at it and says, well, my personnel priority is much higher than my car priority. And I like that process, that those people that are working that get to make that decision or help significantly make that decision. Because I think our department heads are working really well to our budget officer who comes in and says, we need $50,000 because our trending isn't working. And they get that, and so they start working those around. And I've really seen that work well in the last 4 years with our department heads. So personally, I have a problem with Ann maybe going to Brian and saying, well, I don't want you to get this. I think this is more important, when Brian's the one that has to work with it and says, nope, I need this. It's much more important. So I get what you're saying, Councilor Lehman. We need to, I like the idea of having those lists and those priorities. And then how do we work it into our 5-year budget plan to plug numbers in? Maybe we have a list of things that here's a real high priority, but it's not in the 5-year plan because we have no numbers. Either way, it's information.
I think that, you know, I believe in my supervisors, and while they all put in their budgets, there are times when I have to say, you know, we're going to do our very best. And I can share with you my conversation with Brian regarding his public workshop, and he would share the same conversation with you, is that while I can recognize we need the shop, my answer to Brian is, I really want you to have that shop, and if I could give it to you tomorrow, I would. But we have to make sure that we can pay for it. And so there are certain things that have to be in place in order to do that. Doesn't mean it's not a priority, and it doesn't mean it's not important. But we have to, and that's the beauty of looking ahead 5 years and saying somewhere in the 5 years, we need to find that. And maybe it's grant funds. So let's start looking now. As a general rule, I believe that Chief knows what he needs in his department, and so does Brian. And as budget officer, I am the way, and I did go to my staff this week and say, look, guys, we have to figure out a way to keep that fund balance where it's at. And as long as we can do that, we need to put some trust in these department heads that they know what they're doing and that they are fulfilling the council goals. And John, in the past, if we had a struggle, that there was things that had to be decided what needed to go by the budget committee, we did bring that forward. But in the last few years, we haven't had to do that because the staff solves those issues before the budget committee gets it. And the budget committee just has the task of deciding whether or not those budgets fulfill the priorities and goals that are set. And so I like to trust them and know that they know what they need, and then help them to get what they need with some planning.
Thank you. And Brian, is your hand up again? You have a little blue hand next to your face. Oh, it's gone. Thank you. Anne, did you have something else? Oh, John does. John?
So I appreciate Ann's response, and again, I'm straddling two responses, but in deference to Councilor Lehman and listening to the mayor's response, I believe Ann is in executive position, and at times an executive needs to make executive decisions and work with that, not to be divisive, but to be understanding, and to side rail that and say, let the council come in and make the decisions in lieu of the administrator for the city, kind of, to me, circumvents the concept of her leadership position. I like the concept of all the departments speaking up and can say, come to the table and say, well, I believe the administrator, may be wrong. I believe in that open floor discussion, but someone's got to, bring to the leadership team that supervises the administrator what she perceives or he perceives as the ultimate, budget or decision for whatever factor we're looking at. That's why we have an executive.
And I agree with that, Councillor Fox, and that's the tough decisions. With previous experience, I think it was very frustrating to go through as a budget committee and to have to make that determination of laying somebody off. It was up to this body to decide which department was going to take that hit. And I don't think there was administrative direction. It was a scattergun shot. And that is a hard point that really, I think this citizen body shouldn't have had such a heavy burden on that decision. But that's in the bad times, and I agree. And I think that with this process where department heads have their input, department heads take their budget, and they bring it forward to us. Yes, when it gets to bad times, it is times for that city administrator to sit up and say, okay, we need to make the tough decisions and have that discussion with the staff. And at that point, yes, I think in a bad time, it's time for that city administrator to say, we need to make these decisions and bring a proposal forward to the budget committee. I never want to get into that position as a budget committee member to sit there and have two employees. Well, actually at that time, all of the employees, but determine which one we're going to lay off. And then all the rest of them are going to take a 10% cut in pay. Because that discussion is always available to us in the end to approve that or put other input in.
That sounds good to me. That sounds fine. We lost you there for a minute.
Yeah. Thank you. And I guess I should ask if Jeff or Paul have any input, since I can't actually see them.
This is Paul, and my only input is I agree with perhaps having a little more information up front in advance of the meeting next year, the first meeting. Just it would, I think, help to develop more questions. But really, my second piece of input is even more important, which is I really, really appreciate the job the city staff has done. It's clear to me that what is brought to us has been very professionally done. I know what it takes to do a government agency budget, and I know how many hours go into it from the department head and from the the final person at the top that puts it all together. And I just really want to thank the city for doing a really good job this year.
Thank you. And Jeff, did you have anything you wanted to say?
I think it's basically all been said. I just like the idea of having that one executive summary document that goes through and gives you all the information that you need to make that decision.
Great, thank you. All right, any other input on the budget process? Okay, that brings us normally to approving last meeting's minutes, but as we've mentioned, we do not have those tonight. So we'll get to do that next year. And then the next item of business is our two candidates to be on the budget committee. And of course, they're currently on the budget committee. So you have applications from Terry and Jeff. And unless there's any discussion, I will entertain a motion to recommend Terry Dawson and Jeff Milam for the budget committee for another term. Who would like
So moved.
Okay, who was that?
Paul.
Sorry, I couldn't hear. Oh, Paul?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Who was that?
Patty McConnell.
Great, thank you, Patty. Okay, any discussion before we vote? There are definitely two good candidates, as we know. Okay, Sammy, so we will take the vote and we'll do all those in favor with their hand in the screen.
Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. And then Paul Thompson.
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff.
Yes.
Any abstain? Got you, Terry. The motion passes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Well, unless there's any other discussion folks want to have, I will let you think about that just for a minute while I also want to add my thanks to everyone for doing the Zoom meetings and working that out. And hopefully it went pretty well. It's a different thing for sure, especially to try to know when you should step in or not when in a situation like this. And I know Ray has had more experience than I have, but I want to thank all of you for your participation and reading things ahead and great questions, and reiterate about the staff and their preparation and getting us the information we need to make this a really pretty well a speedy process this year. So that I think is awesome. Anything else for the good of the order? Sharon.
Just one quick question. Somewhere in the paperwork, it noted that we might have a new finance director being hired soon. How is that process going, Ann?
We're hoping to make that offer this week. It's not gone as fast as we wished, but we're really wanting to make a good decision. And so we're taking our time with that decision. We have good candidates.
Anything else? Okay, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 7:10 p.m. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, and thank you.